Speaking of listening to citizens, as you all know, I just came off of the campaign trail, if you will, here, being in lots of parts of our community and hearing from lots of citizens. And I was actually a little bit surprised how much and how often this comment around sort of ethics and disclosure and that sort of thing came up. Sort of surprised, and in some ways not surprised. But what it did get me thinking about was how the community may or may not be in sync completely with how much disclosure exists, how much is on the books around ethics, and how well we compare with other governments and some best practices that are out there. And so I've already exchanged some ideas with the city manager about a way in which we can wrap our hands around whether or not there are new innovations out there, new ideas that we ought to consider, and how we might involve the public in that process. And so I am asking if this commission would allow me to bring back a well-thought-out suggestion around how we might, as a joint commission, sort of consider this question and make a decision around whether or not we would like to move forward down a path of soliciting some input around our process, around what currently exists on the books, make recommendations that we may or may not be able to consider and then take up much more fully, much more broadly, but in a very thoughtful way in which we don't alienate good people from wanting to run for government and to serve, that it, to use a phrase from Commissioner Mushin, that it doesn't create any sort of a gotcha system, but that it is responsive, that it is up to date, and that it is reflective of, I think, the values of the community. And I think, if nothing else, it will certainly show us to be willing to listen, evaluate, and respond if we see there's a need.
I'm not quite sure. We want to bring back some information to determine whether or not we should do anything further.
Right.
I agree with that.
Maybe even a recommended process.
Right. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I mean, I suggest there is a gentleman that works for the Florida League of Cities, Dr. Payne, who does a presentation on those things that I've been involved with. And you might want to just explore on whether or not it would be good to have Dr. Payne. I can't think of his first name. He's from Tampa area, the Tampa area. You might want to check and see, but he does a program. He has a program or a presentation on exactly, I think, what you're talking about. I think it's a great idea. Yes.
It seems like to me that last year when we passed the ethics ordinance that we talked about having him come and not only talk to us but talk to the affected members of the staff that fill out disclosure. But does anybody else remember that?
Yeah, sure.
I remember someone being mentioned. I don't know if that was the same name.
Yeah, it might not have been him, but somebody was mentioned, and I think that would be good for everybody. So we could hold it here, and everybody could come and mark it off their
I think
calendar.
it's in part training. I also think it's in part looking at what's on the books and maybe comparing us to other like-sized government, like-sized cities, communities, and determining whether or not we should be going any further than what we have, or if whether or not what we've got on the books is sufficient. And I actually don't jump to any conclusion about how it might end, but I do have some thoughts around what a process, an open process, might look like, that I'd like to be able to outreach to some people, get their thinking on it, and then bring a suggestion back to the commission around what process we might take moving forward.
Yeah, clearly, because of the availability of information, our lives and elected official lives have changed over the last 15 or 20 years. I'm not sure how old our policy is, but I wholeheartedly support you doing that. I think it's a great idea.
As do I.
As does everybody. I think
Thank
it's
you.
great.
It won't take long to bring something back.
But